gives you a good idea of the layout of the entire scene that we will create. It's all very simple, and what we will learn through these techniques can then be applied to something that you might think is a little bit more exciting than something that looks like a cartoon train. Right, so the first thing we need to do is to import the reference image, and I've saved it to my desktop, and you just select it and import it. So it will appear inside the cube. So all we have to do is to scale it up, and I'm going to switch view mode so that we can actually see the image. And if I select all the values in the scale and just select 5, it's increased it by 5, and I'm just sitting it up on that green line there. So I press the X to get a perfect front view, and we'll be using those coordinates up there, the X, the Y, and the Z, and the minus values to align our our model to the background image. So let's save your file. Make sure you know where you're saving it to. And the process that we're going to use here is really simple. We're going to use that background image and just import shapes and change the shapes to match the background image. So here we're using the cube that Blender gives us originally, and I'm just positioning it and scaling it up. And so you can press G to grab it and move it, and S to scale it, or you can just use the icons on the left side of the menu. So I've just added another square, a cube, and scaling it down and moving it up. This is the process that you'll repeat to create the main shapes of this train. So make sure you keep rotating around and then click on the X or the Y to get you back to the perfect front or side view. So adding a cube should be a fairly basic operation. And it's just a matter of aligning everything to that background image there, scaling it. It doesn't need to be perfectly aligned to the background image, but it is a really good guide. With this front part of the train, we'll just make it a little bit different to what's in the image. What's in the image doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But we're going to go into edit mode. So you can go into edit mode just by hitting tab. And when we're in edit mode, the cube that we've put for the front grille of the train, we're going to go to edge select. You can do that by pressing 2 or hitting edge select up there. We're going to grab that top edge and the move tool and just grab it back, just like in the demonstration there. And that's going to create that wedge-like shape. And we're going to have ours a little bit lower than what's in the image. Okay, so just fiddle around with it until you get it into a nice triangular shape. And later on, we'll add in a little bit of a grill effect to that as well. So now we'll add in just something else that's not in the actual image, but something that we need to add in just to make it a little bit more realistic. We need to add in an extra shape here for these smaller wheels to attach themselves to. Otherwise, those wheels would just be running around attached to nothing, and it'll look a little bit strange. So just adding in an extra cube here, and just putting it down the bottom. And you want to make sure that this cube is pretty much exactly the same width as the cube directly to the left of it, because the wheels will have to be aligned. So you can see when you grab the different handles of the scale tool, grabbing the red will just extend it along the x-axis. And again, I'm using the values up there in the top corner, hitting the Y to give a perfect front view of the train. You can zoom in using the mouse wheel or pinching on the touchpad to make sure your changes are as perfect as possible. So here we are just using the cylinder shape to create the top, the smokestack, I suppose, and these other valves, and just positioning it here. And what we can do, once we've got one of them in shape, I've just pressed Shift and D, and that duplicates a shape. So Shift and D, and I'm doing it again here, Shift and D, and you just grab the duplicate and move it across, and just change the shape to suit the new objects. So we're going to use a technique here shortly that will make these three different cylinders match the reference image. So I'm going into edit mode for the middle cylinder here. And what I've just done is to add a little function which enables me to be able to very easily focus on one object. So if you follow those same steps that you just saw on the screen there, you can also do the same thing. So using the extrude tool just to extend this cylinder and then scaling out the top face. Then I'm going to change tool, go to the, you can just get rid of that background image there just by clicking on the eyeball. And I'm inserting a face using the insert face tool and then the extrude tool to push down that face that we just created to create a smokestack or the exhaust of the train. Keep saving it all the time. That should be second nature. Bringing back the background image there. So it's really useful to turn the image on and off if it's getting in the way. So we're going into edit mode for this cylinder, and we're going to create a bulge at the top. So going to top view by hitting the Z, and I've just selected the top face, and now we're choosing the insert face tool. And I'm going to insert many faces here, so I'm just clicking and dragging many times to create many new faces. And making sure that the last face, the very middle face on the top of that cylinder is selected. We're now going to select what is called proportional editing. So I'm just clicking on that now. Proportional editing is a really handy tool. And what we can do is use our mouse tool, the mouse wheel, to scroll in or out, or we can just use our two fingers on the touchpad to select a different amount of the mesh that we will be able to move. So I've pressed G to grab and Z to grab it on the Z axis, and that just restricts the movement to the Z axis. And here we're doing the same thing. Once again, I'm going to select the top face of the cylinder. I'm going to just press I in this case. I is a keyboard shortcut for insert face. And I'm creating lots of faces here. Probably created too many, more than we needed really. Going into front view, the very middle face has been selected. Proportional editing is on. I'm going to then move the middle face upwards. I need to lock the movement into Z, so I've pressed G and Z. And just by scrolling the mouse wheel or moving your fingers, 2 fingers up and down on the touchpad, you can change the amount of the mesh that you're influencing with that movement. Just make sure that you do turn the proportional editing off after you have finished using it. Otherwise, sometimes you get unexpected results. So here, we'll use it one more time on the front, the nose of the train. So again, the technique is use the insert face tool to create lots of new faces. Leave the middle face selected, and with the proportional editing turned on, we can then move by pressing G and Y. We're moving along the Y axis and just fiddle around with the amount that it's influencing until you get a pretty good, nice round result. This next step will build some windows. We're just going to select that cube that we had there as the cabin, and we're going to just get it out of the way for a moment so that we can see the background image. I'm adding in another cube and making sure that you're in that nice, perfect front view by pressing X. Try to shape that cube so that it fits the large window there, like I'm just using the scale tool. Go to the side view, and what we want to do is to make sure that this shape actually extends well beyond the edges of the train model, because what we will do is to use these shapes to cut out the windows. So I've just used Shift D to duplicate that first shape, moved it across, and here we go. I'll use Shift D again and move the duplicate into the third window space. And what we will do is to join these three shapes together to create one shape. So by using Shift click, and then you can right click and select join, and they've all now become one shape. You can find that shape in the menu here and just change the name to window. That will make the next step easier if you rename the shape. So there it is. And we can name that first cube cabin so that we easily know what each shape refers to. So we're going to select the cabin. I'm going over here to the modifier tool, select add modifier, and we will use a modifier called Boolean. So select Boolean, select the eyedropper tool, and move over into 3D space and select those shapes that we've joined together to create the windows. And then what happens is when we select to hide those window shapes, we can see it's actually cut through the cabin cube. Okay, and we're going to repeat pretty much the same steps now to create a interior part of the cabin. So I'm going to add another cube, just using G to grab, and I'm going to just make it big enough just to fit inside that cabin cube. I'm going to call this cube that we've just inserted interior. Now we will apply another Boolean modifier. Select the icon, or what you can do is just hit that square there and then select interior. And now we can press the eyeball for interior and it disappears. And now we've got this nice illusion that inside that cabin is some space there. We'll now go through the process of creating the train's wheels. First of all, we're just going to create one of them and we'll add some color to it. And then we will duplicate and change that one wheel that we make. So I'm going to add a cylinder. You will have to rotate it on the Y axis, and then use the grab tool and the scale tool to position it there at the end of the train. So we can go to the side view and just shorten it, the width of it. You can decide how thick you want your train wheel to be, and we want to align that train wheel just to the very edge of that cube. We're going to go into edit mode and we're going to attempt to create the different rims of the wheel and the spokes. So I'm going to use the insert face tool and just try to copy the reference image. There's an outer layer of, it's probably hard steel, and then there's an inner rim, and then there's the spokes, and then there's the inner circle and a smaller circle inside that. So it doesn't need to be perfect, but do your best to create the same uh, different shapes there. So I found this next part a little bit tricky. What I was trying to do was then add a little bit of depth by trying to figure out a way of making the spokes. So you can see me trying different methods here of figuring out, trying to select the spokes of the wheel in an easy way. And I think I sort of found a way of doing it. I've selected all the spokes around there by clicking on one of them and then pressing Alt, and then that selected the rest. And then I selected the checker deselect, and you can see me just trying to fiddle around with some of the values here. And what it's doing is just deselecting a certain amount determined by the values that you're changing there. So it was hard to get it perfect. I think no matter what value I put in there, it seemed to have an odd number of spokes versus spaces appeared, but I don't think it'll be recognizable. So once you get a good result, I've just then selected the extrude tool and pushed in some of the selected faces. So what we want to do now is to start adding some color to the train. And we'll do that to this wheel first. We won't duplicate that wheel until we've added the right colors to it. So here I've pressed on the materials tool, new, and I'm going to make the wheel mostly red, like the reference image. You can make it a little bit metallic looking. I'm going to actually, in the space where you can name the color, actually name it red. That will just come in handy a little bit later on. I'm going to hit the plus button and add another color and make the second color black. And I'm just increasing the roughness of that because I don't want it to be reflective. And again, name the color black. That will make it easy later on. So go back to edit mode, and what we want to do is to then figure out, well, which sections will be black. So I've chosen the outside face, and by clicking Alt and click, it selected all of the outside faces. That's a really good technique. It works sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't seem to work. So you'll see me now just adding black to some different areas of the wheel. And we're doing this so that when the wheels rotate, we can actually see them rotating. If it was all one color, I don't think we would see the wheels rotating very much. And now in the next section, you can see me adding in an existing color for the cabin and then adding in red. Also, just duplicated the background image so I can see, just to get some inspiration about some other colors. So the grill is red, so we can just assign the red color to that. And you don't need to make it exactly like the background reference image. So I thought, let's make it really, really bright and cheery looking train. Fiddle around with the metallic, the amount of metal. That means it looks a little bit more shiny. At the other end of the scale, it looks a little bit more plasticky. So again, naming the colors as you put them in. I've just realized I've just forgotten to add in a little shape above this new shape that we've got here. So just quickly adding it in. You don't need to do this. This is just me being a little bit overly picky. So with these shapes that are on top of the train, just to add a little bit of interest, I've gone into edit mode. I've added in a loop cut and choose face select, press Alt, click, and it will select that ring of faces around the exhaust. And I'm going to assign the yellow color to that, just like in the background image. And you can do something similar there for this other cylinder shape here. We can add in, go into edit mode for this shape, scroll in so you can see what you're doing, and using the loop cut tool, we can add in a couple more lines and then go to the select tool and select the faces. Make sure you're on face select mode, and you can also assign these faces the color yellow, just like the background image. It makes them look a little bit more interesting. So now we'll create the grill effect. So by selecting that front triangle shape, select the front face, go into the front view. I want you to insert a face, and then press right select, and you get a choice called subdivide. And I want you to add in 8 subdivisions. So that means it's chopping it up, and then I'm going to press Alt and Shift, selecting every second row of shapes there. Use the extrude tool. So I'm actually going to press E and Y, and that's going to extrude those shapes just along the Y axis. So the first few times that I tried that, it actually didn't work very well, and it took me a while to realize that I had left the proportional editing function on, and I was getting a very strange result. So if you're not getting the right result, make sure that you have the proportional editing tool turned off. And I've just added in a black color there for those indented shapes. So now what we can do is to duplicate our wheel. So Shift D, and then I've pressed G, Y to bring that wheel forwards on the exact same level. So I've done it again. Shift D to duplicate. In this case, I have to then grab the wheel, move it down, scale it down a little bit more, and then Shift D to duplicate that wheel, G and Y to move along. Go to this front view here and just make sure that the wheels are actually touching the base, the cube. Otherwise it will look a little bit strange. Now we want to duplicate the wheels again, but this time we will flip them around to the other side. So I've gone to that view from the rear of the train, and I'm going to rotate the wheel 180 degrees. So I can just type that into the Z-axis value for that wheel, and once you rotate it, you will need to just realign it. So just zoom in and get it nice and close. Go then to the side view and press Shift D and then G, Y to grab it and move it along the Y axis, and follow the same process for the smaller wheels. So I'm grabbing the small front wheel, Shift D, G, X to grab and move along the X axis, rotate the wheel 180 degrees and zoom in. Make sure it's nice and flush against that cube. Go to the side view, Shift D to duplicate, G, Y to grab and move along the Y axis and align it as close as you can.